welcome to Speak Up St. Louis.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Hey man, glad to have you. I feel like a lot of these episodes recently have been like, this has been a long time coming because we've talked about this for a minute. And so I'm just glad that we are in a position to be able to provide the platform for you to be able to share your story, the things that you're up to, and then wherever the conversation goes from there. So appreciate you being on as well too. And so, yeah, if you want to, just share a little bit with the folks about who you are and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So my name's Julian Keaton. I grew up in St. Louis, specifically Walnut Park. Been here, I think, since 94. So this is all I know for the most part. But I mostly was a musician. Kind of that's how I got my roots and everything, is just being a creative. Poetry is really how I got started. And it was really an outlet for me to be able to just express myself. I was always kind of like that odd kid out. Like I had friends, but I wasn't popular.
You were a floater.
I was definitely a floater. But it was one of those things where once I found my voice through my writing, everything started to click. And so through that, ultimately, it allowed me to understand what it meant to be who I am. And then also understanding like who I come from and my family. So like, I think something that's super important is that my family on both sides were farmers down in Mississippi.
Okay, yeah, that's where my family from too.
And so we have been entrepreneurs forever, right? And so having that kind of be instilled in me literally through blood, like my parents met at an entrepreneurship program. So it like, that already gave me everything that I knew to be like, all right, when I go out into this world, I'm gonna be my own leader. I'm gonna be my own boss. I'm gonna be a leader for my community, and I'm gonna make something shake. And so that's been the true blessing of me and the definition of me. I've only had one full-time job my whole life, which is something that I had took on recently. And so with that, like I've been a full-time entrepreneur dating back till I was like 12, 13. So this is who I am. This is what I do. I do a little bit of everything from marketing to management to business development. You name it, I touch it. And I'm certain we're going to dive into that through the conversation. For sure.
Yeah, I think that's interesting though, just because I feel like that's not something that you don't hear too often of like, yeah, I've been doing this forever. Like
my whole life.
Like it wasn't because, for some folks it's that you hear some of the commonality of the story of, oh, I was in my full time and I decided to make the leap. Whereas you've always been rooted in that way. And so it kind of makes sense that your skill set is so multifaceted in the way that it is, because if you don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yeah. So
you've in a way, you've always had to be like your own teacher and the student at the same time.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that that dynamics of being able to, I guess, because maybe in part, I guess where I'm getting at too is that, in that kind of that learning process, there's also kind of figuring out what are you really good at and what are some of the areas that you need to refine as well too. So how has that grown over time just in that sense?
I think a lot of it has to do with just trusting the process. You never know what's going to work. And so I've been blessed and fortunate to trust my instinct, and my instinct has always led me right. I give a lot of credit to the Most High for that. I think the other thing that's important for me is just doing the work. I'm a self-starter. I don't like to wait. I'm just impatient like that. But I've had more success being like, hey, like, what's the problem? How can we get to a solution for this problem ASAP? That's how I've been rooted. That's how I make my decisions, but also like standing firm on like my morals and my integrity, to where if something does come up, I'm not being swayed in the wind around something that doesn't always align with who I am as a person. So that's kind of how I've stayed rooted in that.
Right.
Just knowing like who I am, what I do, and then just like trusting the process that it's going to come together.
For sure. And so when you also talked about the creative side of who you are, really more so the larger part being the writer that you are as well too. And so I'm curious on, and this might get into some of, the work that you do with Julian Jules as well too, but I guess, when did you kind of were able to see the connection between being able to elevate your creative skills through the entrepreneurship skills as well too?
I would say, that's a great question. I would say right around 2010 when I went to college. So I went to Webster for audio engineering, and I did everything you could think of as a student. But it was me understanding that St. Louis needed a platform to share art and share specifically music. So I had a radio show called Stereo Assault. We did it for, I believe, 6 years. But I was only a student at Webster for 1. And so blessing to the department over there at Webster to allow me and my team to be able to continue the radio show that did amazing. It was through that where I understood, like, yeah, I could be this creative, but I understand that there's a hole, that there's a gap that needs to be filled. And using my ability to be creative and also, like, my ability to be an entrepreneur, it was easy for me to be able to, like, see how I could support others and how others needed to be supported. And that's what it really came down to. Like, that is what tripping off my words. That because of my experience from that radio show, it allowed me to fully understand, like, hey, people need support, people need help. And so, yes, I can be the writer, I could be the rapper, but for me, it was like, how can I best serve you? And that's where, me managing Mastermind and the MME crew came into play. That's where me managing the Souls of Liberty, like I've managed a ton of people, but it was really rooted in me just, like, wanting to give a platform and not just use my creative ability for myself, but being able to share that creative ability with others in a different way.
For sure. And I think that's interesting because, also important to be able to understand, one, I think because of your skill set, it's expansive. You can fit a lot of different roles to be able to meet the needs of not only of the goals that you have, but also empowering, uplifting others.
Yeah.
But at the same time, being able to narrow that down to an extent to be able to say, no, this is my lane right here.
Yeah.
And so I guess also too, because especially with St. Louis and the history of it being such a very strong music place and arts place, it's interesting that kind of continues to kind of be a conversation of, there's musical talent that's here, but not necessarily the groundwork to be able to either keep it here or two, to be able to grow it here in that way. And so I guess, could you dive a little bit deeper into maybe from your perspective why that is the case? Like, because we know that St. Louis has a lot of musical talent. We know there are a lot of really great live experiences for music here in St. Louis, but what is the gap between that, at least from what you've seen with the work that you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. My work is really rooted in laying the foundation for musicians being able to make a living off their intellectual property, right? And so what I've come to understand is that we are in the middle of the country. It's flyover city in respect to the industry that we're in. You're either in New York, Los Angeles, Nashville, Atlanta has made a very prominent name for itself over the last 30 years. So it's one of those things where, okay, if we're, like, sitting in the middle of or even then, to the extent of, at one point in time, and still to this day, we're at the core of it. Like, St. Louis is the middleway part of the country, whether you're going up and down the Mississippi, or if you're going from the Missouri or to the other rivers that come from the east that goes west, right? So we got all of the culture But one of the things that we have to understand is that real economics and real economies live on the coast. They live off the big bodies of water. So understanding that, it was like, okay, if we don't have that same big economic standpoint when it comes to, art and the population, because that's a super big part. We have to really lean on our abilities to just be able to really zero in on our craft, get really good at it, and be the best at it than anywhere else in the country. And St. Louis has a history of that. Like all genres have roots in St. Louis. And the challenge though is that the education piece on how can we monetize it, because we historically have not had labels or publishers or the big things that make the industry, they don't have a home here. For a while, even I speak recently and then I speak further in the past. When Nelly started to gain a lot of momentum and he was going diamond and, he was selling these platinum albums, the industry started taking a home here, more A&Rs here. Then there was a period where they left because we just didn't have the sauce no more, right? We're starting to see that again now with folks like a Smino or Jordan Ward or Sexy Red or a ton of other artists that are doing phenomenal work, right? But if we take it even further back, when we look at the Chuck Berrys, the Tina Turners, Ike and Tina's, Miles Davis, like the labels weren't here. They were in Nashville or Memphis. They were in Chicago. They were in Philly. They weren't here. And so oftentimes they had to go elsewhere, which is what we still have that trend of people having to leave. And to an extent, that's okay. But I think we're at a very interesting inflection point where we have to really educate ourselves on what it means to make money in the music business. People don't even understand that this is a business and that there's 5 different core ways in which you have this copyright and how to, I don't want to use the word exploit, but how to mechanize this copyright for it to generate revenue for yourself. Artists here in St. Louis don't understand that. A lot of artists all over the world don't understand that, but specifically here in St. Louis, a lot of artists just want to perform, and that's great. But at the end of the day, how can we make money in all different facets? And that's what I live for, and that's what we're really missing. I think once we really get that point down, we'll start to really see the industry call St. Louis home.
I appreciate you breaking that down because I always think about that just even from my perspective as as a visual artist as well too, of like, well, why isn't it like it's happening all over the place? But it almost seems like it's the same equation even with the music. It's not just because St. Louis is St. Louis, but there's other things layered upon that make the I don't want to say situation like it's a negative thing, but it makes the environment for what we're seeing right now with the arts.
Yeah. And I'll also add, because I didn't add, it also has to be a little bit of, I don't want to call it pressure, but the non-creative also has their part to play. Like, we need to educate ourselves as creatives on how to make money with it, but we also, on the flip side, we need the non-creatives to respect what we do and not just not pay for a show, not buy music, not buy merchandise. Those are all things that people put their money where they want to put their money, and there's no doubt that there, or I should say nothing wrong with that per se. But if we really want to make St. Louis the powerhouse, how big is this region? It's at least 1.5 million people in this region.
Pretty damn big.
Like it's enough of us to where we could really start buying records. And that's the trend. Like, people are starting to break from streaming. Buy music. Actually support artists, because these artists don't want to work a 9 to 5, but their music is what makes our lives go round.
Right.
When Ferguson happened, it was the hip hop community that was on the front line, putting their neck on the line for us to be able to get to this point of just understanding and acknowledging the pain and the trauma that we as a region have gone through. And it's one of those things where how many of those artists have been financially backed? They're still working 9 to 5. Some of them lost their jobs protesting. So it's like, how can we uplift a lot of these artists who do have a real message? Mm-hmm. How can we empower them? And the best way to do that is putting money in their pockets through buying their music, buying their merch, and buying tickets to their shows.
That's interesting too, just because it's that idea of it's kind of full circle, like going from buying the physical to this, this, I guess, what's the word? I guess this real kind of like, it was just oversaturated from a digital standpoint of like, go get the Spotify, go get the Apple Music, the Tidal, and X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But now you're also kind of going and saying that, no, it needs to make a return back.
Well, it's happening.
Yeah.
It's literally happening. You got to think about it. Most artists don't make any money from music. They don't.
Right.
And so if we really break it down, I think the payout rate for Spotify is 0.004. So I need somebody to stream my song at least 3 times for me to make a penny off Spotify, right? That's crazy. That's really crazy. And even then, that's not even the real part of it. The way that Spotify works, it's not user-centric, meaning that if I listen to Smino majority of my time, of a majority of a month, you would think that my $10, $11 that I spend on Spotify Premium, that most of that will go to Smino. No, that's not how that works. It's the labels have a market share, and Spotify pays out whichever labels that have the most market share, and the independents, they kind of get stuck with the hand-me-down, right? So that's where it's like, if artists really want to make money, we have to really rethink how to generate revenue in this digital world, this matrix that we're living in, right? Because it's not in me trying to get 1 million streams to make $1,000. That's never gonna work.
That's not gonna equate to anything.
It's like I've been working some ad campaigns, specifically getting people to go from an Instagram to a Spotify, right? Mm-hmm. And if it cost me 35 cents to drive traffic from Instagram to Spotify, I have to hope that user that listens on Spotify streams it how many times to make that 35 cents back, when the average listen to user ratio is like listen to stream ratio is like 4 or 5 times. So it's a loss leader. The reality of it is, and so there's this thing where they say build your brand, and over time you will be able to generate revenue. But we don't have time, right? So it's monetize everything that you can now. Yes, leverage the fact that these platforms are accessible. Use it as a lead magnet, but don't let it be the main way that you generate revenue, because you will always lose.
Yeah. So I'm hearing 2 things. I think one is don't have too highly of like a reliance on a system that's not built. One is not, because it's not built for you to make money off of it.
It's not.
No, it's just not. But I think a part of it too is, to what you're getting at too, is because I'm hearing a couple things. I'm hearing like, I can already like hear this in the back of my mind, this idea of like buying local, kind of in that way. Yeah. Of like getting back to the roots of, I think what it more so is though, is getting back to the roots of building relationships with individuals, and to the experience that you're trying to create as well too. And so I guess to kind of that point as well, especially within St. Louis, whether I'm driving down Locust and seeing some of the new spaces that are being built up, or even out there in Chesterfield, I'm blanking on the name of that right now.
The music park that's out there. Yeah,
the Music Factory or whatever. I guess, does that, do some of the creation of new spaces for music to be shown at, do you see that helping with some of that, kind of in this building the experience and kind of creating this more locality to the work?
Yes. Mm-hmm. However, there's always a however. We have to think, for the longest, especially for artists that look like us, we weren't welcomed in these spaces.
For sure.
Right? One of my mentors, she was one of the first people to get any establishment in the Del Mar Loop, like the mid to late 90s, to start letting us have events in their spaces, right? So like, just to think about that, it's only been 30 years since that, and we still struggle with with that. You know, sometimes a venue would say, oh, you have this type of music, well, you need this type of insurance. But that insurance, to get that insurance, it's going to price you out. So you're not able to do the show there, right? So that's something that we have to really be mindful of, is like, are these spaces really meant for us, right? And we, as beautiful and as intelligent and as smart as we are, we always find a way to make it work. Now, the other side of that, though, is that, yes, these spaces are made for music just in general. And I love the fact that music now is getting so much love in St. Louis. We still need people to buy tickets in advance. And so we're starting, and it doesn't have to always be a Live Nation, Ticketmaster ticket, right?
Because that's a whole other conversation right there within itself.
But there's plenty of artists that are putting on shows, and the venues have to rely on advanced ticket sales. So for a while, especially immediate post COVID, where we saw a lot of cancellations at Del Mar Hall. And a lot of it was because people weren't buying tickets in advance, at least for our St. Louis artists. So when we say, hey, please buy a ticket in advance, and not just, we have to break that culture of just showing up and buying a ticket. Like, no, please, buy a ticket in advance. That lets us know that you care, and it lets the venues feel more comfortable having us in these spaces.
Yeah, but not just having you in the space, having the next person after you that's doing something similar to you. So it's like, oh, I've already taken the first risk. It worked. Now I can open the door for the next person to come through with hopefully less tension and friction, for them to be able to have a space for their creative outlets.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and I think it's interesting too that, because essentially what we're talking about is ownership.
Yeah.
That's what it really boils down to, that creatives can't, I shouldn't say they can't, but there is an opportunity, I should say, for creatives not just to make the music, but to create the space and the experience and all the other things that go with it, to be able to have something to where it's like, now I don't want to say because you are, in a way, you're cutting out other folks, but you're cutting out other folks so you can actually make the livelihood and the money that you deserve from the work that you put in.
Yeah.
So
one of the things I want to touch on that real quick. So one of the things that was super interesting to me when I went to the St. Louis Sound exhibit that was at the Missouri History Museum, they touched on how jazz musicians 100 years ago were getting blocked. Black jazz musicians were getting blocked from being able to perform because of the union, and the union wanted white musicians to play over, black folk. We have that history still to this day, right? The reason why I bring it up, though, is that how can we combat situations like that? And I think honestly, it's going to get back to artists owning venues.
That's what I was just about to say.
That's the beautiful thing about the Blank Space, was that it was a team of artists and artist-minded people running that space, right? That was the beauty of it. That's why it got so much love, that it was artist-centric. And I think we have respectfully, we have a lot of folks that are in positions that aren't artists, that don't come from an artist background. And I'm not saying that for everybody, but the key decision makers in our market don't have music backgrounds. They come from, usually marketing or business. And they understand the business, but don't necessarily always understand the art and the music. And so, there has to be some give and take, some pull, some compromise around how can we make these spaces more attainable for musicians and then also the non-musicians alike.
Yeah, so this is multi-layered in that way, but but a lot of what we're talking about is also why you started Julian Jules as well too, to be able to find opportunities. One, because you were talking about just the management of individuals and helping with some of those. One, I would say it's funny, we just had a conversation, 2-3 weeks ago with Lee, because he's a financial advisor, and that's kind of what you're not a financial advisor, but you're doing a lot of the things that an artist may not necessarily know. and you're like, hey, here are my recommendations
Right.
for how to get you to where you're trying to be.
Right.
So I guess, what does that relationship look like between kind of you and the artist, and how are you navigating that? Because obviously that probably is a give and take, just like any relationship. On here's what the artist wants to do, but then also you're like, but here's what you need to do.
Right. So a couple things. One, I'm transitioning out of the Julian Jules name.
Mm-hmm.
We're transitioning to the Jewel Mine.
Okay.
So mostly because I want folks to understand, and it's for all the brands that I've always had, I've struggled with people understanding it's not just me. It's a team of people that are working, and I wanted to make sure that the team also felt that they had some ownership in the work that they were doing, right?
That's what's up.
So that I want to just make that very known,
cool.
that we're transitioning to the Jewel Mine is the name. But I don't mind holding your hand and help managing you and understand that, this is the right way. However, we have to get to a point where artists need to take more ownership in managing themselves. And that's, for a lot of folks, not their strongest suit. But what's important is, if you don't understand the foundations of knowing how to run your business, somebody might come in behind you and throw some things off. And so through my business incubator, like the artist development incubator that we have, is really designed to educate artists on how to, one, start a business, how to maintain that business, also how to scale that business. And that looks like so many things, but at the core of it, it's, let's start you with a 12-week course on, step by step, what is the foundation? Do I need, what's your business model? A lot of artists don't know. A lot of artists don't know how they want to make money from music. They just want to make it. And that's great. But you have to know how to generate revenue, or else, the venues won't take you serious. The labels won't take you serious. I don't want to say fans won't take you serious, but fans also want to see you grow.
Right.
And so for me, it's one of those things where I like to see where people were at and develop programs around the needs of where people were at. Mm-hmm. And that isn't always like a one-size-fits-all type of program.
Right.
And so, we have our online courses that we offer, but it's like, go through the course, but talk to me. Like, where's your weak points? Where is it where things are dropping that you don't understand? Like, let me and my team also really support and see, all right, you might not be doing great here. Well, let's see how we can put some energy and some love on that to get you where you want to go. So it's never like I said, it's never a one-size-fits-all type of scenario. We like to create relationships and really help people get to where they want to go.
For sure. And I think that's really great to hear, just not only the business aspect of what you do, but also the one-to-one relationships that you're creating to really help folks to be able to capture as much as they want to.
Yeah.
Because like you said, like, some folks just want to make music, and there's nothing wrong.
There's
nothing wrong with that. But I think, but if they want more, that you're providing the space and the routes and the opportunities to do that. I wanted to take it back just a little bit, though, because I'm curious on, getting into Jewel Mines. Like, what was that like? What was, when did that moment come to where you were like, yeah, this is my thing in this space? And what are some of the things that you've learned along the way? Because you've been doing this for a minute now.
Yeah.
And so, what are some of the things you learned from the process as well, too? Because I'm sure you're, the first person that you worked with and who you're working with now, your experiences, who you are, have totally changed as well, too.
Yeah. So I kind of do the whole full story of it all, right? So back in 2018, I had just did Dimensions, the first set of scavenger hunts that I was doing, right?
And that's another company or business that you started.
It's another tech startup that I've been operating. So I had just did our MVP of Dimensions, and I was an assistant manager of Escape the Room downtown, and I got fired for Too many no shows, I guess. Whatever. But I was pretty much unemployed and struggled finding work. And it made me realize, like, I have a knowledge base that I probably really need to tap into. And so I, at that time, was just going kind of like weekly, maybe every other week, just going live on Instagram, just sharing knowledge that I acquired from being in the business at that point, 9 years. And so it was very eye-opening to go on these lives and people say that they are hearing some of the things that I said for the first time. And these are people that have been in the business just as long as me, right? So it made me realize maybe I should just make this a consistent thing. And that's like come January of 2019 is where I was like, this is what I got to do. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just going to share what I know. I'm going to invite my industry friends on to share what they know. And we're going to really pour into helping artists and professionals, aspiring professionals that want to be in the entertainment business. We're going to give them the jewels to be able to be successful, right? And so it was during that year where it was my aha moment, right? Mm-hmm. About a year, I want to say 10 months into me doing that, I got my first client through this brand. And so it was the artist MC Trey. And so what's super funny about that was that his very first project, his very first mixtape was my very first mixtape that I DJ'd and hosted 10 years prior, oddly enough. And so it was one of those things where it was his kind of like breakout video song that he had, and it just worked. Like, he hired me to run the ads and help with some social strategy, and everything clicked. And I want to say 5-6 months later, he won a Slumfest Award, Best Video.
That's dope.
Right? And so it's like, we got something.
Right. That was enough of a, oh yeah, check the box. You know, we can really go and do this thing for real.
And then COVID hit. Right? So, and so the beautiful thing about COVID, it allowed us all to kind of slow down, but me and my team, we was working. Mm-hmm. You know, they told us to stay isolated, and we respected all of those things. However, we knew that, like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to, like, everybody on their phone, let's go harder. And so it was a blessing for us to be able to continue to go at it and be outside and just make fun content and really get it out there. The beautiful thing is that Trey had a relative that worked at Facebook. And so we were getting ad credits. So we were getting to experiment. And it allowed me to really understand how digital advertising worked. Mm-hmm. And so it led me down a path to really be able to support artists now and get me to better understand the storytelling facets when it comes to really gaining an audience, but then also nurturing an audience with your story to get them to buy in and really become a locked-in fan, to be a locked-in customer. And so those were like all of the aha moments, like the first 2 years of me really running the Jewel Mine, or Julian Jewels, which is now the Jewel Mine. And today we have a community of about 30 musicians through our membership platform. And through that, we, ask them, what do you need? How can we help? Do you need help with your advertising? Do you need help with your social strategy? Do you need help with your e-commerce setup? Like, we really want to support, and our vision right now is to support 100 musicians and helping them get where they want to go, right? And whatever facet that is, that's like our goal. But for the future, like we're planning to launch a residency program where artists can record in our studio, and through that we'll be able to also cut them stipends to be able to market their music at a high level. And I'm not just talking like $10,000, $15,000. I'm like, let's figure out a way to raise money to cut you a $75,000 check and get you everywhere for you to be able to compete and get the platinum plaques, to get the Grammy noms, to be able to compete in this national, international market, because our music is just as good or as great or better than everyone else.
You just got to nurture it.
You got to nurture it. You got to you got to drip out that story a specific way to get people to see you for who you are. Because the reality of it is, these parasocial relationships that social media has allowed artists to be able to create, with fans, a lot of these fans, people see themselves in artists. They see themselves in the celebrities. It's just our ability to be able to communicate that effectively to get them to buy in.
Yeah. How do you share your story with somebody you've never met before? And how do you make them essentially give a damn out of 50 stories that they've seen? And
personalize it. How can we make this experience personalized to every single person that watches every single post that we make? And it's not always going to hit every time. It's not always going to resonate every time. But we're going to put up the shots needed to be able to get our content, to get our story to resonate with everybody that comes across our brands.
You got to put enough reps in so you can actually start hitting them in the game.
Yep.
I like the when you said that the story about I think I was watching ESPN or I was probably on social where they talked about how many shots Steph Curry gets up in a practice is far more than the amount of shots that he puts up in a game.
Right.
And so it's the reason he can do what he does on the court outside of just being gifted is because of the amount of shots that he's putting up in practice.
I think one of the things that a lot of artists also have to understand is that you don't have to be a content creator. I think so many people are starting to get really burnt out on, my TikTok got to be perfect. I need to make it go viral. Or my Instagram reel got to be this, or this Twitter video got to be that. It's like, no, that's cool. Like if you want to be a content creator, do that.
That's a different job all
in itself. That's a different job. That's a full-time job within itself. And it pulls you further away from being a musician. And so I tell artists all the time, like, you can go and create that content, but post a video you performing your music. Do that. And you're going to have greater success at getting booked for shows. You're going to get greater success at people acknowledging your music. And it also allows you to be super vulnerable and raw, which is what people want out of artists.
But I like that, though, too, because it's make your content about you rather than trying to be, rather than trying to build this larger than life character. That takes time to build. Yeah. Because essentially, when you're doing that, you're trying to build something that you don't necessarily have the skill set in, and that takes time. Yeah. And that takes you away from what you're actually passionate about.
It's balance.
Right.
It's balance. I think I was watching a short clip of Vince Staples talk about being an artist.
He has some great clips.
He has some amazing clips.
Him and L.A. Russell.
And it's one of those things where we're starting to see, respectfully, yes, you could be the content creator if that's what you want to do, great. But, when you have the rollout, when you're, rolling out your music, and it's done with, you did the 8-month or the 12-month, rollout, take that time. I think that's the real reality of why, even Kendrick is who Kendrick Lamar is, right? Is that he can create a very unique story that a lot of people can resonate with, take his time crafting it, mastering it, and then roll it out, do it for a year and a half, and take a step back. That was what the music business was. And I think we're going to get back to that because I think a lot of people were burnt out on this overconsumption. It's New Music Friday every Friday. No, work your music. It's how many billion people in the world? How many of them have a cell phone? How many of them have YouTube?
They're not going nowhere.
They're not going nowhere. So, take your time. Find all the creative ways to create content on your own terms, and your music is going to get heard. The big thing is figure out how to monetize it.
Right.
How to build the relationship that's organic enough for people to want to buy into it, and it don't feel forced.
So something you said earlier was that, when you got to this moment to where you were like, I need to tap back into this, this 10 years of experience. Could you talk about that a little bit more for folks? Because there are a lot of folks out there that are sitting on skill sets, visions, goals, dreams that haven't fully tapped into it in the way that they may want to or should have. Could you talk about what that was like for you and maybe share some of that, folks? So, because I think sometimes, like, you know, for when folks are looking at the work that people are doing, they're like, oh, you know, they did that overnight, you know, that type of thing. But it's like, that was 10 years of skills that you had to acknowledge for it to be able to take its next step.
Yeah. That's a great question, man. I still feel like I ain't had my break. You know, it's one of those things where I remember having a conversation with my guy Q Holder. Q is a big time publicist. I don't even call him big time because he's more humble than being called big time. But he's a very prominent publicist based out of the DMV. He got his big break being the publicist for designers Panda. And so through that, he's been able to work with Kanye and Pusha T and everybody in the industry. And I had flew him into St. Louis back in 2017, I believe, to give a lecture on digital marketing. So we were having breakfast. He was like, yeah, Julian, you've been putting in the work for a long time. And it usually takes about 10 to 11 years, you know, you reaching your 10,000 hours for that work to pay off. And it paid off. And it's one of those things where, like, in reflection to that, it makes me realize that we all, to your point, have gifts. We all have skills. We all have visions and dreams of being able to be fulfilled in whatever that we want to do. The thing about it is, are you ready? A lot of people say they're ready, but don't do the work. You know, it's one of those things where be a self-starter. You know, I've had the blessing to have a family that supports everything that I do. Not everybody has that. But if you don't have that, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and do those affirmations to make yourself feel in your spirit that everything that you've ever done, there's a reason why you went through that story or that process. It's going to come back, and you're going to be able to use that somewhere down the line. It's just a matter of knowing when to pull it out. And it's one of those things where just do it. That whole Nike slogan of just do it, I take that to the grave with me, man. Like, just do it. That's all I really have to say. Like, don't wait on anybody to tell you anything. If you need to just wake up in the morning, drink your water, brush your teeth, and as you brushing your teeth, talking to yourself in the mirror to say, like, hey, you got this. That dream of wanting to do X, Y, Z, and that little doubt and that little fear that sits in your gut that tells you ain't ready.
Talk about it, because that's real too.
Oh, you gotta wipe that. You gotta detox that out your system.
Because that'd be, you know, and you already, you know how that feels too. So you be in the process of doing it, and it's like you working on it, and then it's like that little voice come up like, dang, why are we doing this?
Yeah, but you also gotta, like, persevere through it.
Right.
You know, and a lot of folks give up just as they were about to break through. And so don't stop. If you fully believe it with all your heart, with all your spirit, with all your mind, don't stop. Keep going.
Yeah. So to shift gears a little bit, and I appreciate the transparency. Before we get to that, I appreciate the transparency, though, that you had of just about that relationship to the work, because that's really important, just being able to, one, affirm yourself.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of stuff that goes on internally with people, but also externally as well too, that sometimes can hinder that work, but being able to utilize that in a way to propel yourself forward. So, you know, you have Jewel Minds, but then you also have Dimensions that we kind of briefly mentioned before as well too. You want to kind of unpack that more for folks so they can hear about all the things that you do?
Yeah. So in 2015, I was so burnt out from music that I needed a break. So with $50 in my pocket, I went to LA, moved to LA, Didn't know. I knew one person from middle school, high school. I knew I had family, but I was ready to just take a risk. And so I did, made it work for 6 months. But during that process, I struggled. I didn't know a soul. I didn't know, left from right. I didn't know where to go. A lot of common things that a lot of transplants here in St. Louis struggle with. And it didn't really connect for me to understand that until I came back, probably full time back in the spring of 2016. Because right after LA, I did a small stint in New Orleans. And same thing, like I didn't know anyone in New Orleans. Didn't have any money to really explore or gain any type of affiliations with any groups. So I was just kind of learning as I went. And so when I got back and saw how Pokemon Go started to take off and how people were discovering places, they were meeting people, something clicked. I was like, they doing Pokemon Go wrong. Because, yeah, the nostalgia is great, but there's a community piece that's missing. And how can we connect community with public local art? And it dawned on me, it's like, what if we started doing scavenger hunts where music was a key element to it? So what we decided to do was partner with the SIDS of Grand Center Art District, Cherokee Street, and Central West End. And we did 3 scavenger hunts that if you completed one of those 3, you got access to a secret location concert.
Oh, that's dope.
And so it was fun. It made me realize that there is a community piece where people really should discover all the amazing things that are happening in their city, because a lot of folks don't explore. As much as they say we explore, folks don't explore.
They go to the same spots they're comfortable with.
They're comfortable with, but let's get them a little uncomfortable for a second, right? Let's do some things. Let's get people to see some things that they haven't seen or experienced yet. And so we did that, and people had a lot of fun doing it. And Wash U saw me doing that, and with the amazing support of Rachel Lequier, who at the time was the Delmar Loops executive director, I was able to do Dimensions as a first year experience for Wash U students in 2019. Now, mind you, in the midst of all of this, I was hosting large-scale jam sessions at Webster, where we would bring 75 musicians to come jam. And when they weren't jamming, we broke them out into some of the classrooms and let them record music. We're sitting on maybe like 25, 30 hours of music right now. And as I was like going through that process and crafting the business, like really understanding what the business model could be, did the Square One boot camp, which led to me doing We Powers, Elevate, Elevar. I started to really understand that there's a large sector of people that don't know anything about St. Louis, and it's these college students that are transplants. And you think about now how, the economic pressures of the world and COVID kind of have forced a lot of folks from the coast to come more inland. A lot of folks are moving to St. Louis. So it's like, all right, how can we really get people to really explore and understand St. Louis? And what we plan to do, because we still have been developing it. The thing about technology is that you have to have a large sum of capital. And to power it, but then also to market it, to advertise it. And we didn't want to give up equity and interest in our businesses because I have 2 co-founders with it. And so we decided that we were going to bootstrap. We knew that it was going to take some time, but we wanted to be able to own every part of the process. And so we're just about ready to start rolling some things out.
That's exciting.
Right. And the beautiful thing is the launch campaign that we have. So I might be too premature in speaking on it, but I want to share it with you just because I think it's going to connect a lot of dots on why music is still a key element to what I do. Mm-hmm. So with these jam sessions, the thought and the idea was like, all right, we got all this music. How can we get it in the hands and the ears of people? So our vision, our plan is to launch a region-wide, summer-long scavenger hunt that as you complete certain activations, you unlock music. And the more that you like unlock these things, unlock the music and unlock certain videos that come with the content, et cetera, you're going to get clues on a secret location music festival. And you have to complete most of it to really find out where it's at. But the headlining set of the festival will be the compilation album that comes from these jam sessions. And so we and the reason for that is because we want to really center it around community, mm-hmm. getting the people of St. Louis to explore St. Louis, explore the sounds of St. Louis, to explore mm-hmm. the taste of St. Louis, to really discover and explore what it means to be from St. Louis.
Yeah. And also in a much different way, too, mm-hmm. because it's a one thing of driving through St. Louis or going to your same spots, but it's another thing when you're kind of off the beaten path to an extent, yeah. And somebody else is navigating you through St. Louis in the way that they want you to see it, yeah, as well, too. And so I think that's really interesting and really excited for when that happens. I'm going to have to be on my phone, too, doing the scavenger hunt.
And one of the things that we've been trying to figure out respectfully is, like, not to get people addicted. Yeah. Because I think people are exhausted of being addicted to their phone. And mm-hmm. so we're trying to find a very healthy balance, which is part of the reason why we've taken our time with it. Finding that healthy balance of how can we measure and get people to be active. But once you've done that, hour, 2 hours a week of mm-hmm. discovering, you can take some time away from it. Yeah. And come back when you're ready. Like, that's the reason why we're trying to make it like right and feel right and not feel like, I got to be on my phone all the time.
Right, I got to know when they're dropping out the next content and things.
And because at the core of it, again, yes, it's about promoting local art. It's about connecting people with other people. But again, at the core of it is how can we build community? Yeah. And the piece that I didn't mention that's super important is that we understand that St. Louis is being gentrified, mm-hmm. like it's known. But I think one of the things that we need to think about when it comes to being equitable is how can we get people to be involved? And so as people play the game, they're going to be giving us certain data voluntarily, of course, around like how they want to see their communities developed. Mm-hmm. So we could put a pin in an activation at a building that needs to be leased, and we ask the community, hey, what do you want to see here? Do you think you need a grocery store, or do you want, like, what do you want? Right. And based off of the data that we get, based off of talking with urban developers of the city and the county and figuring out what makes the most sense, then we build out whatever business that needs to be there, but not just make it like some corporate-owned business. Let it be something owned by the people, where it's hiring people in that community and giving them the skills needed to actually operate that business, right? So it's yes, it's fun, but we also want to make sure
strategic as well too.
That we're being strategic, that we're being equitable, and that we're giving people something that can actually change their life.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a lot of different things that are just intersectionally around not only just community, but also creativity and tech, but also relation. It always comes back to this level of relationship, and you're finding a way of doing that with something that we all have in our pockets, as well too. And so that's a great way of being able to bring community together, not only around some of the agenda items that you have, especially because promoting the arts is a part of it, but also just getting folks back together in ways that they may have never expected to get together in that way. So, yeah, let me know. I'm ready to be on my phone like whereas I'm going. But to side note though,
Yeah.
when you brought up Pokemon Go, I had a funny story because I remember when that was at its height.
Yeah.
And one day I'm driving, going down the street, and I see these group of kids coming. I'm like, all right, yeah, they gonna stop. No, they looking down at their phone, trying to get to the other side of the street. I had my window down because they was like, "Oh, I gotta go get this Pokemon." So y'all look up when y'all crossing the streets.
Be careful,
please. Like we can't have a moment because I got scared because I'm like, oh, stomping on the brakes because I'm about to hit somebody, baby.
Yeah, no, I mean public safety is our number one focus.
Of course.
You know, we want to make sure that, you know, because we're creating experiences that can be for kids. We're creating experience that can be for the high school students, and as well. So it's like, how can we make sure that we don't have kids, to your point, in the middle of the street trying to catch a damn Pokemon, trying to catch a Pikachu that's sitting in the middle of Tucker and Washington? Like, no, don't do that.
Right, please, no. St. Louis ain't built like that yet, where you can just hang out in the middle of the street.
Soon, but it might be a minute, but soon.
Right. But yeah, no, that's super exciting, and so, you know, for folks that want to follow, whether that's Jewel Minds or whether that is Dimensions, where can they go and find that good information?
You know, I have never really figured out a way to centralize that, but feel free to follow me on social. You can find me at Julian Keaton. It's just my name on all social platforms. I'm pretty accessible on all platforms, and I will get you whatever information that you need, whether that's you're a musician or entertainment professional looking to, you know, better understand the business, or if you're interested in like exploring St. Louis, which like our vision is to expand beyond St. Louis, but that's a whole 10-year plan once we actually like launch. But yeah, like if you're interested, just reach out to me on the LinkedIn, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, wherever that you're on the internet in this matrix, like Julian Keaton, you'll find me.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that's, you know, because I just want to make sure that folks can connect to, you know, the incredible work that you're doing, not just around the music, but like your hand is in so many buckets and connected to so many things that are happening here in St. Louis.
A lot of the cultural things that happen in St. I want to bring this up because nobody ever really touches on it. A lot of the cultural things that happen in St. Louis, I usually have my hand on. I just keep my mouth shut and quiet.
Right,
But like I'm behind the scenes. I'm always doing something. I'm always helping out with anything and everything.
For sure. Yeah. So before we wrap up, though, you know, we talked. You know, we were talking about the writing portion of what you do, and so it was cool because you was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a writer. and so you were like, "Yeah, I got something to share." And so, I just wanted to make space for you to share some of your writing with us because we always appreciate. We want to just uplift, you know, the creative talents that folks have when they come onto the podcast. So.
Yeah, so it's been a minute since I publicly performed any of my music. It's, I think, been before COVID. I've also just kind of been like, I don't want to say holding on to it, but finding the right time.
For sure.
And I had that inkling to write more and to start sharing. So I'm happy that you asked me to speak on something. So I wrote a poem back in 2017 when I was doing the Earth Dance Farms.
Shout out to Molly Rocker.
Shout out to Molly. And so I was I think it was during this season in my life where I was learning about my love for farming and gardening. My relationship with God and the Most High really grew at this time. And I started to fully understand who I am and who my family is. Like, everything started to connect some dots. And so I wrote this poem, which I don't remember, so I'm going to read it, but I practiced it enough to make it feel good.
Well,
so
hey, we appreciate it, man.
So this is The Silence All Around. Shh. Quiet. Do you notice the silence all around? The birds, the bees, the crickets that all make sound? As their voices echo and pierce your ears like frequencies that disturb your vibe, most days I wonder, how will the Most High turn the tide? You ever notice how green surrounds us, but lately it ain't Been in our lives, they say you are what you consume, so let's tell no lies. Is it kale or the dollar? Grass or green screens? And have you noticed, but the trees are being screened? Oh, geez, just ain't the same no more. 'Cause what you chiefin' ain't really kush for sure. Now, let me break this game down a little more. Do you know what you are living for? Some days I gotta sit still. Too busy dealing with that noise that got me constantly ripping and running. Gotta plant my bare feet in the ground to recharge my batteries after 6 days of solid hard work. Relax. Do you feel that energy drawn from the sun that you absorb like a sponge, making you invincible like the Most High chosen ones? Are you too stuck in the noise of loud and obnoxious screens, constantly providing that high of needing and receiving too much attention to where your ego gets shot every time you get to reach in? I ain't preaching. A fellow brother just need to get his speech in that America is America in your native spoken language, but our attention is misplaced, keeping us from receiving what some assume is our lost language. But shh, quiet. Do you notice the silence all around? If you're quiet, you can hear the silence talking back to you, giving you your purpose and giving you your name. And if you ain't already noticed, it Ben gave you the game plan. At least you got to follow it. Think of new seeds and why the established roots won't acknowledge it. It's that wind, pest, too much water, stress. That's a whole lot of noise causing that plant to not be at its best. Don't believe you can control the noise either. That's the illusion. That's the test. 6 days of hard work, 1 day of rest. Sit down with the silence. It'll come to light that you're blessed. But shh, quiet. You notice the silence all around.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It is powerful, but I shouldn't say but, and it's always great to be in conversation with other creatives and hearing what they're working on and having the platform to be able to even share it. So I thank you for doing that, because, that's artists, we hold our art tight to us.
Yeah.
And that's a part of who we are. And so to be able to share that with us on the platform, hopefully that inspires others to be able to take that next step in their creative practices in whatever form that takes. So thank you so much for that, Julian. But before I let you go,
Yeah.
I got our final question for you as well. It is a two-part question. One, what do you love most about St. Louis? And the second part is, what do you most want to see change?
What do I love most about St. Louis? The people. There's something about St. Louis, man. I've been all over this country. It's the warmth that you get from people. It's sometimes it can be a little cold, but it's something that you don't get anywhere else. I think another thing that I love about St. Louis is the fact that people really do speak their mind here more than anywhere else in the world. I think it's in the water. And I think lastly, I love Cahokia, the mounds.
Mm-hmm. Wish we had more of them still.
We are the mound city. It's unfortunate that the powers that be of the time decided to build all this amazing architecture on top of all of these mounds, right?
Architecture on top of amazing architecture already.
But it's fascinating to really think that the indigenous people of North and South America would meet at Cahokia Mounds once a year. You know how powerful and influential that is?
That's charged.
That's just on the other side of the river. Like the indigenous people of the entire continent was in Cahokia at least once a year.
What happens in this area matters.
So it's a reason why St. Louis is one of the most important cities in all of the world. The second part is, what do I think we could do better? Is that what it is?
What do you most want to see change? However you want to take that route.
That's a great question. Cat Williams touched on something this year.
Wait, you talking about on Club Shay Shay?
Oh, Shay Shay. That everything that was done in the dark is going to get revealed in the light this year, and I think that's very true about what's happening in St. Louis. I think there's a lot of covert racism that still exists here that I think needs to come up to the surface, and we have to handle it accordingly. You know, Ferguson Uprising 10 years is going to be 2 months from now. You know, it's a lot of stuff we ain't touched.
A lot of stuff that still ain't changed.
A lot of stuff that has not changed. We need to address it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's certain corporate interests in St. Louis that has a certain level of influence that we need to really question their motives. And I feel like we're going to see people really start to speak up on the oppression, the exploitation, and the lack of empathy for the people of St. Louis, especially the black and brown indigenous folks of St. Louis. I think a lot of folks are going to start talking because folks are tired. And so if there was anything that I would like to see change is we got to figure out how we can make this more equitable and start, you know, leveling the playing field for us to be able to all have a healthy and happier life. Once we do that, I think we will really start stepping in the right direction as a city.
For sure. Well, I think the work that you're doing is a part of that larger story that's happening in here in St. Louis. So continue to be able to create space for folks, to educate folks, to help folks get closer to their dreams when they didn't realize they were closer than what they thought. Yeah. All those things, I think, play into that larger concept. I don't want to even call this concept, the reality of what we want St. Louis to be.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it is that warmth. It is that one-to-one connection. It is the way that we tell the truth about how we feel about things. All of that is St. Louis, and I think the way that you and your team are doing that work is adding to that narrative. So one day we can actually sit here and be like, oh, it ain't talking about it being 10 years down the road. We're living in the blessing of what it's supposed to be. Yeah. So thank you so much, Julian, for coming on and sharing your story and all the incredible work you're doing, man. I really appreciate it.
It was an amazing time being here. For sure.